I live in Derry in Northern Ireland, and the local hospital is pretty creepy to say the least. My mom works there in the elderly ward, and they actually had to build a new area of the hospital because so many people refused to work due to paranormal activity. A lot has happened over the last few years, and it's all related to the story I'm going to tell you. I find this one the scariest. One night, my mom was working on the night shift. They're allowed an hour break in the middle of the night, so she decided to sleep in on one of the spare beds. She was woken up by her alarm and went to get out of bed, but she couldn't. She was stuck. Something was holding her down and she couldn't sit up. She said it was like someone was pushing down on her chest and she was finding it hard to breathe. When the thing or person or whatever it was let go, she managed to catch a glimpse of it. She said it was all black like a shadow and it had no face. So after that, she ran into the staff room to tell the other people who were working what happened. Before she could tell them, the buzzer went off in one of the rooms, so one of the other nurses ran in. She ran back in instantly and told my mom and the other nurses to come in. There, on the bed, was an old woman sitting on her bed, and she was staring right at my mom. My mom knew her well because the patient hated her due to my mom's hairstyle and music preference, but that's not the point. The lady was hissing at her and was screaming for her to get out. My mom ran out of the room while one of the nurses put the patient back to bed. About an hour went by and the buzzer started going off again. They ran into the room like before, and the woman who was hissing and screaming before was laying on the bed, and there was someone laying beside her. The thing was the shadow person my mom saw earlier. It was laying there with a hand over the lady's stomach, and then it started to fade away. As it faded, the old lady died. After all the hype, my mom came to the conclusion that the shadow person was death. She had been told by old people of seeing this figure before they passed, but never believed it. Then, that morning when she left work, she was walking home and fell down a steep set of stairs and broke her leg. She came to the conclusion that she saw this death figure because it came to warn her to be careful that she might get injured. She didn't know what to think, but needless to say, she believed in all those stories from now on. About 2 months later, the ward was closed. It was still being used as a storage unit, but whenever my mom goes down there, she still doesn't feel right. But no one has seen the Shadow Man since. I normally fall asleep watching movies on my Xbox every night. I had been watching Super Troopers for about a week. I don't actually watch the movies. I just use them as background noise so I can fall asleep. One night I woke up at around 3:15 a.m. I remember being 100% awake because I could see the menu for Super Troopers on my TV. I tried to reach for the controller only to find out that I couldn't move anything on my body. This wasn't a, "Oh, I fell asleep on my arm so I can't move it" situation. I couldn't move at all. I freaked out a little bit and started looking around my room. When I turned my direction towards my bedroom door, there was a shadow figure, just standing there facing my bed. I closed my eyes and tried screaming for my sister, but I couldn't make a noise, only whispers. I sat there, squeezing my eyes, trying to block the image from my mind. A couple of minutes later, I opened them and the figure was gone. I tried moving my arms to grab the controller, hoping it was just my imagination getting the better of me. but I still couldn't move an inch. I searched the room with my eyes to see if the figure had moved to a different spot, but didn't see anything right away. A second later, I felt the hair on my left arm rise to my attention, so I quickly looked in that direction and almost shit my pants. His head, only his head, was peeking over the left side of my bed. After that, I don't really remember what happened, but me waking up in my bed wondering what the hell happened. That was definitely on my top 5 scariest moments of my life. When I was younger, about 6 or 7 maybe, we lived in a small town in one of the more secluded areas of Pennsylvania. It was a typical setting: mom and dad stores, people who had grown up with each other for generations, and large wooded areas. At the time, I was living with my parents and my grandmother in a single house. 2 houses down lived a family with a little girl named Joanna. We were both only children and quickly became friends. Joanna was a big outdoorsy type, and we were always climbing trees or towing the edge of the woods. I was never allowed to actually go into the woods though, having stricter parents than she did, and I didn't dare try to lie about it. One day, Joanna came over and wanted to play. My grandmother told her I'd play later because I had to go get a checkup before the school year started. It was summer, and we often stayed out late playing because the sun was out longer. That evening, I was hanging around the house when I heard a tap on the screen door. Joanna was standing there, which I found odd because she would usually let herself in. I came over and opened the door, and she asked me to come play. She looked really scruffy, more than usual, so I asked her what she'd been doing. She told me she'd been in the woods and found an awesome spot and that we had to go. Just this once, she promised. I felt uneasy and told her I couldn't because of my mom. But Joanne kept insisting, and the whole situation just became strange. She wouldn't come in the house and just stood there outside the door. Her insisting became aggressive at one point. I felt myself becoming anxious. I pretended to go upstairs and ask my grandma if it was okay to go play with Joanne, then lie and say she wanted me to stay in. Joanne was angry and I closed the door. I eventually peeped through the blinds to see if she was still out there, but she wasn't. That night I was in the living room watching cartoons while my grandma made dinner. There was a huge commotion suddenly as my parents burst in, rushing over to me. My mom was crying and hugging me, and I just didn't understand why she kept saying she was so relieved. Earlier that morning, when I had gone with Nana to the doctor's, Joanne had gone into the woods and was playing. She somehow tripped on a root or a rock and fell down a steep decline, breaking her neck, and died. My name's Tom, and this is a personal experience of mine. So we move into our new house. This is around 10 or 11 years ago, and it's only about 5 minutes, mind you, from the old house. We've moved in, and it's now about 6 months later. So my dad tells my mom that while they were in bed after she'd been asleep for a few hours, he couldn't sleep, so he goes into the kitchen to get a drink. He gets his drink and goes back to bed, then looks out into the hallway. He says he saw the apparition of a man in blue vertical pinstripe pajamas. We all joke about it, and nothing happens again. Fast forward about 9 years later, I'm home alone playing PlayStation in the living room. I don't have the sound on because I have a headache. Out of nowhere, I begin hearing a faint growling or snoring sound coming from one of the lounges. Thinking someone's there, I turn and go to say, "Shh." It goes on for at least 20 minutes, then stops. When my parents and sister get home, I tell them. My mom and sister joke about it. My dad, however, doesn't. Fast forward another 8 or 9 months later, I'm asleep at around midday when something hits me on my back, as if trying to wake me up. I don't, so it hits me again, but a little harder this time. I turn to see a blue pinstripe pant leg leaving my room. Thinking it was my sister, I go out and look for her. She's still sound asleep in her bed in black clothing. Dad's at work and Mom's on the lounge. Mom's in a purple shirt and white pants. 2 weeks ago, at about 4 in the morning, I walked into my room and dropped my water bottle. As I picked it up and looked at my bed, there was a man in blue vertical pinstripe pajamas sitting on my bed looking straight at me. He just stares for what seemed like forever till he finally says, "Hello, Thomas," then vanishes into thin air. I told my parents and sister. They said it happened to all of them too. I used to live in a small town called Douglas in Massachusetts. Nearby in Rhode Island is a graveyard in the woods. It's hard to research online for some reason, even though it's registered and everything. My father took us there once as small children to scare us, and he used to tell us stories about the place. Supposedly, one of the women buried there, a Judith Daly, was murdered for being a witch. It's odd that she's buried there, as she has no relation to the Richardson family, who make up the rest of the graveyard. Anyways, her grave looks practically untouched by time. Even though it's the oldest grave there, all the other graves are crumbling or have been destroyed by local kids, but hers remains untouched, except for the large hole in the front of it that's filled in with stones. But when my father was young, it didn't used to be. According to him, any dog that goes anywhere near that graveyard goes crazy and tries to dig up her grave for no apparent reason, which explains why it would be filled with stones. He brought his own dog there once and said his dog had the same reaction as all the other dogs that have been there before. He had a few more stories. One about his friends and him heading up there and having the car not work even though there was nothing wrong with it. They had to push it, and as soon as they got far enough away from the graveyard, it started to work again. There were stories that on Halloween, a coven used to practice there and worship Judah's spirit. Supposedly, one of his friends went there once and witnessed this. He thought no one saw him and he left unharmed. The next day he realized he had dropped his Zippo, so he headed back to the graveyard. In the spot where he had hid, there was a knife in the ground that had been burned black by fire. Needless to say, he stayed far, far away. Once my friends and I were old enough to go out there, I told them we had to explore this place. I didn't expect what would happen to happen at the time. I thought it might be a little spooky. Yeah, I was off on the little part. I have gone there over 50 times, so really, it's just easier to list some of the experiences I have had. The percentage of people I bring experience a feeling of dread upon stepping in the place. For some people, it's only a slight feeling. For others, like myself, the place just feels wrong, as if it doesn't want you there. The feeling of being watched is a constant companion. We always stand around Judah's grave on the far right side of the graveyard, as her spirit is supposedly the cause of the hauntings. On the far left side is a small metal fence. Myself and others often see small lights peek out from behind the poles in the fence. They freaked me out at first, but I've decided that whatever they are, they mean no harm, unlike other things in that place. Screams have been heard multiple times in the woods near us, always a woman's but varying in the distance from the graveyard. Whispering has been heard as well, but never anything coherent. I have seen shadows move, and even a few times I thought I saw one follow us out of the place. Phantom lights have been seen by myself and one of my good friends. Once in the sky by me and once in the field nearby both of us. These lights were so vivid and behaving so oddly that the first time I saw them, I was brought to tears. It just hurt my senses of reality to see it. I had always suspected that there was something else to this world, but seeing such vivid evidence was too much for me the first few times, I'll admit. But it only got worse. One night we brought far too many people to the graveyard, so it wasn't very scary. Half the people just stood around and goofed off, moping about what a disappointment the place was. We left early, but upon stepping out, I was suddenly compelled to turn around. I noticed vaguely that a few of my friends did the same, but it didn't really register until we all started screaming. Something large and black was on one of the larger graves, and after a few seconds, it shot off into the sky. This was followed by what I can only say appeared to be an orb fly all over the top of the trees around the graveyard. We all ran back to the car, but my friend's vehicle would not start no matter what we did. We rolled the car down onto the road and attempted to jump it to no avail. The battery appeared to be 100% dead. My friends left her car frustrated and slammed the door. The power locks immediately slammed down and none of the doors would budge. Even the key wouldn't turn in the lock. We all started to freak out, and she was considering smashing the window when I noticed the orb again. It was hovering off in the distance, slightly over the tree line. I pointed it out and we all freaked out a bit more. Suddenly, the orb turned red before disappearing. Right after it did this, the car doors unlocked and the engine started by itself. Seeming no worse for wear, we fled as quickly as possible and didn't go back there for a while. Since then, worse things have happened. The same friend was tackled by an unseen force on the path leading to the graveyard, and her hands and arms were scratched up badly. I heard a dog or a similar animal hop the fence of the graveyard one night and run straight at me. I threw up my hands and hit the ground, expecting to be attacked. After screaming a bit and not being bit, I looked around to see my friends staring at me oddly by the light of one of their cell phones. I was the only one that had heard the animal. Perhaps one of the most disturbing experiences was shared between myself and the same female friend. I said before that Judah was the cause of the hauntings, except I feel this is untrue, because every time any of these super intense things happened, I always felt a strong masculine presence. I can't explain it, but the presence has always felt, well, wrong, as if it was never human but something far different. I think we saw it once. I felt something nearby, so I looked to my right and saw what I could only describe as legs in front of me, but they were incredibly thin and pitch black. I shut my eyes and shook my head, and when I opened them, they were gone. I informed my friends I wanted to leave, and as I did that, my friend looked at me in horror and said, "Why? Did you see the stick guy?" I still go back to this place whenever I'm back in my hometown. I know, stupid. I should stay far away from this place. Call it an obsession or a morbid curiosity, but it's just one of those places shrouded in mystery that I want to know more about each time I go. What's up, guys? I hope everybody had a good Friday, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Nightmare Army. I'm always looking for new soldiers in my Nightmare Nation. So anyways, guys, I hope everybody had a good Friday. I know I did. And just to clarify something here, I noticed in the playlist for 5 True Scary Ghost Stories, there were 2 Volume 2s, and I just noticed that now. I swear to God, I feel like the biggest idiot ever, but anyways, I fixed it to Volume 3, even though the thumbnail art says Volume 2 on it, but it's just a little mistake that I made way back when that I just noticed now that's driving me crazy, so if anybody is confused, this is Volume 4 now, obviously, so just letting you guys know that. Well, anyways, guys, I hope you all enjoyed the video. I apologize for this video being incredibly late on a Saturday. Well, by the time this video gets uploaded, it'll be 1 o'clock, so, God, so late. But anyways, guys, I hope you all had a really great Friday, and just remember, the best ideas always come out of nightmares.